It's time for part 12 of the Medewi campaign commentaries, and all we really need to know about what happened last time was we fought a gigantic battle and we lost Arakamani, we lost his son Kashta to a suicide actually, and we lost two armies and the port of Tyros to the Selucids. So we're in a dangerous situation. Lacumazes is now King Pharaoh, but he was actually wounded in an assassination attempt immediately after this, so he almost lost our whole family. He's going to be able to come back in a bit though. And the Selucids were generous in that they didn't really follow up on this attack. We did lots of damage to them, so they had to spend time replenishing. Then they were victim to the classic Judea drought, so they lost half their men as well, and they ended up not invading us, so that was pretty good. We had to go back to war with the so-and-so city-states there since they attacked our satrapy Rhodos once again, but we'll deal with that in a second. Now, after a while, since the Selucids hadn't attacked us, I was actually able to move all the way up back to Tyros with my forces, and I've even got a third stack on the way, so our forces will soon be back to the strength they were at previously. There is still one Seleucid army nearby, but Ozilke's leading the attack can use night attack skill to get rid of that army, so we can just go in and kill the forces that were in the town, a nice chance to weaken the enemy easily. And of course, attacking Tyros before it rebuilds its garrison makes life a lot easier as well. So what I want to do here is make a liberated faction, since I don't want the same thing to happen again where the enemy will just swarm onto Tyros and hit Ozilke's this time. We're going to use the liberated faction as a nice buffer zone, or at least that's what I thought at first, because the Seleucids aren't at war with them, so they would just ignore them. But I realised I could get Tyros here to actually come in and declare war on the Seleucids in exchange for a trade agreement, which probably wasn't worth it for them. But I thought this is good because the AI for Tyros will now cheat, and they'll probably get 1.5 armies or something off this one stack. That will contribute quite a lot to the war, potentially. Although I realise that right now they're very vulnerable since they don't have enough forces from what they spawned with. The Seleucids could just take it back immediately. Fortunately, they didn't. Now I fleeced the so-and-so city-states once again, making them pay me for peace, which takes them out of their war with Rhodos once again. They really want to attack Rhodos, and every time they do, they end up just losing loads of money to us, so hopefully that cycle will continue. Now still nothing happened from the Seleucids. They just didn't attack us, and their armies all walked off somewhere. They are at war with lots of other people, so they may have just decided to focus on something else for a bit, and that's going to help us out. I was even able to just advance up into their territory and start thinking about taking something. I'm looking at this place, Palmyra. It's a walled city right on the front line, so if we could take it, it would be nice to use as a defensive position. But apparently there's some sort of extra stack that's coming into this fight that we can't quite see at the moment, so it's actually going to be harder to take than I thought. Plus the garrison is really good, so at first I set the place to siege and just started making siege equipment, still intending to go in, and I'm going to use Lacumazes here to come up and support. Then it would be a 2-on-2 fight, which wouldn't be too bad. They do have extra forces over to the east, so it depends if they would bring them in. Now we discovered that extra stack. It was just outside of our vision range in the fog of war, and I really wanted to set up an ambush there so that it would get ambushed as it came over to join the siege sally, but that didn't work, so I just cancelled the siege and thought we'll try and take down that army separately, then attack the city. But because Lacumazes was stuck in the zone of control there, I had to attack the city to get him out of it, but as he broke off from the siege, he went the wrong way and is now actually right next to that army, and our forces all split up. He's totally stuck thanks to the zones of control, and Ozilke's can't help him out either. So he's in enormous trouble, and indeed the Seleucids do come to try and exploit that. An army comes over, so it's going to be two armies in the garrison right here. Fortunately we can retreat and we escape this time into some allied territory. That's a bit better. An agent comes over, and Lacumazes, clearly bored of the constant assassination attempts against him, just stabs the guy immediately. He is not having any crap anymore, but he is going to have to fight one of the Seleucid armies. So this isn't too bad. This is kind of what I was going for. I wanted to take it with both of my armies to make it super easy, but the balance bar's still in our favour. So there should be a chance to weaken the enemy, plus we're in our own territory, so any losses we take will be slightly mitigated by replenishment later on, and the enemy's army isn't all that powerful. It's got some defeatable units in it. It's not all the elite hoplites like the previous armies we faced. The battlefield we get for this fight is pretty much the worst thing ever, a gigantic downhill slope across the whole map, so that's going to make it very hard for us to do anything. We're so slow, it's hard to move anywhere. I wanted to go around to the right and then try and fight sideways across the hill to get rid of the enemy's downhill advantage, but because they're going to be walking towards me, they are the aggressor in this fight, the fighting got started before I could get into any sort of useful position. So my main plan is to attack the enemy in the flanks. I've put quite a lot of my army into two large flanking groups, one of them being distracted by some enemy cav there, that's annoying. And while we try and get those attacks going on the flanks, we have this group in the centre, mostly our nobles, led by Lacumazes, who are trying to just lock the Selucids in place. These are the troops best suited to fighting against enemy phalanxes, since they can form a phalanx themselves, but they're going to be fighting uphill. I don't know exactly how much of a difference that makes. I remember, at least I think, in the original Rome 2 when it first came out, hills didn't do anything to combat, because they were going crazy on simplifying the game or whatever, but I think they did put some effect back in, I just don't know exactly what it is. So anyway, we need to come in on the flanks, and both of our flank groups are distracted in various ways by a couple of units coming to work the flanks. But in both cases, we are going to get some units in to do the damage. A lot of the enemies are armoured, so our units have very slow progress, which isn't really going to help us out very much, but at least we can get these morale shocks going. Here we get a nice bit of contact with several enemy units at once. Doesn't really do anything, of course, because it's the Selucids, they're disciplined, they can take rear attacks without it just shattering their lines, so we need to combine it with some actual damage, which hopefully we'll start doing over time now that we're fighting them downhill. They have broken through our front line, and our archers actually had a chance to shoot the enemy's phalanxes in the flank, but right now they're focusing down the enemy's general, and perhaps more importantly, the Syrian elephants. The Syrian elephants are the best elephant unit in the game, they are super powerful, they're currently bogged down and totally in range of my archers though. So we got a pretty good chance to kill them just shooting at these guys, while our poor nobles were just having to tolerate them being there, and we lost quite a lot of that unit. But we did get the enemy in the end, and of course it's all buying time for our flank attacks to continue. We're starting to do damage and get more and more units into position to try and get some work done. Most of the time the enemy doesn't really react to us flank attacking them, we need to actually do the damage, and here it starts, this guy going full Titus Pillow and just hacking his way against one guy into the enemy ranks, so hopefully that'll cause our unit to technically be rear attacking that phalanx there as well. Oh, there it definitely is now, and we'll inflict the morale shocks. Now, I think we were able to kill the enemy's general at around this point, so you can see their morale starts to turn. Those elephants are running amok and most of them are being killed. We're fighting range units up here on this corner, so that's going to be a little bit easier, although it is peltists, I think, so they still go down pretty slowly, but it's possible. And we have the enemy's army completely surrounded. We just need our little frontal force to hold, and there's Lacumazes right on the front line fighting all his men. Super dangerous for him, but it seems to be paying off. The enemy starts to rout as the damage ramps up. With most of our army now behind the enemy's position, it's actually going to be pretty hard for them to rout, because they'll start retreating up the hill back towards their deployment zone, but they're going to have to go through so much, it's very unlikely that any of these guys will succeed. They probably should have just kept fighting forwards and ran down the hill to escape from us. They didn't work that out, and this is going to be a great chance to kill all those heavy units that we weren't really killing in the battle, and now that they're routing, they will be defenseless, and we'll take them out. Very nice. After I get bored of the slaughter, we call the fight to an end. It's a decisive victory, just what we needed. Lacumazes pulling off some decent performances there in what I think is his first battle, actually, a very important one. So the Seleucid frontline forces are weakened, and we can go back to thinking about taking that settlement. As long as we killed enough of them, that is. And we did kill enough of them. You can see we got pretty much everything on the enemy side. One unit getting away with it. It's the unit that no one cares about, so that is perfect. On our side, moderate losses and some big losses among our noble units, which is pretty bad since they are the best things in our army right now. So it'd be very good to try and get them back. And they're hard to get back because you can only recruit them from the nobility. I'm not sure if I can recruit them from my allied territory here. I think I might be able to. Anyway, now a quick aside. While that was going on, I prepared another army to come for this sneak attack on the other side of the Seleucid Empire. We're hitting this place, Harmosia. It has nothing in it, but it's got a giant garrison, so it's still going to be hard. And yeah, the plan is that this will either distract the enemy, or if they're still sufficiently distracted by our western actions, we'll just start rolling the Empire up and just taking things with this extra army. So I'm just making a load of siege equipment and we'll leave them to it. I think if I have enough siege equipment we can probably just auto-resolve our way in there and then play it by ear after that. But for now we will focus on this frontline situation. My third stack is ready, so we're going to start moving out, and we actually have to move out right now because Judea is still in its eternal drought after all these years, so we need to not be in the region to avoid attrition. So let's take a look at the Seleucid setup. They've got a general that they recruited to stick with that surviving unit, and they've got a small army nearby plus the garrison to overcome. I think they're probably on par with our two armies overall, especially since Lacumazes' force is damaged, but it did replenish from our allied territory, so that is nice. That answers my own question from earlier. Now the problem is that Seleucids can't actually go around to help make an attack because of how the zones of control and the impassable terrain happen to be working in this setup, so I can't really do any sort of concerted attack on the enemy to use our full strength. Pretty annoying. I need Lacumazes to actually clear his way up and get into range of the city himself in order to team up with Seleucids. I also wanted to get out of Judea in order to avoid that attrition, of course, and the options aren't very good. The one thing I can do is set one foot over the border and then go into ambush mode so the enemy don't know I'm here, and basically just steal the water from under their noses and hope they don't notice me there. But we inadvertently actually triggered an ambush because that tiny little army started moving somewhere. We teleported in front of it to stop them, and now we have to fight them, so I might as well kill them in the ambush battle. But this doesn't really gain us anything, and actually is a bad thing because now they're going to know that we're here. We've wasted our hiddenness on killing those guys, and once they found out we were there, an army came over from very far away to start challenging us. It teams up with the nearby army in reinforcement range, and that's a hard battle. Luckily we didn't have to fight it, but we will have to go back into the attrition zone, so my plan has failed. At least we took down a couple of enemies along the way. The Seleucids look like they attacked Tyros there with a fleet. I can't tell if they won and then just didn't do anything and ran away, or if they lost. Anyway, so in the next turn we need to sort this situation out. I noticed that the Seleucid army that came over to attack Seleucids had just run away somewhere and left the other army standing guard on the border. They came to challenge it and we had a big advantage. This army is not very big and it's got a couple of trashy units in it. So because of that, I'll just auto-resolve those guys out of existence so we can get a decisive victory. Now, as a pro tip, we really shouldn't have auto-resolved that because we are going to need as many troops as we can for the coming action, but I am very lazy, so I just auto-resolved that. I think min-maxing players probably should have fought a battle that was even that far in our advantage. Anyway, after that, the Seleucids' next move is they actually do come and take Tyros. They've got forces off to the northwest that can come down to just swipe it away from our little ally, and more forces appear on the front line. They're getting serious once again. So against the frontline forces, we're going to try and do an ambush with Seleucids luring the enemy onto my new army. But Lacumazes has a bit of a situation. He's actually trapped by the zones of control of Tyros and Palmyra now. He can't get out of Seleucid territory. The only way for him to do it is to take Tyros once again. And according to the balance bar, that's going to be pretty hard. However, we have to do it anyway, and I was still optimistic because my exploit sense was tingling. We've got two different groups of shipborne units coming in, and they're going to have to land before they can come to help the settlement, and that means we can exploit that fact and fight some of the battle outside of the settlement to weaken the enemy in advance. There were two beaches on the map, and the southern beach was much bigger, so I correctly gambled by deploying all of my army there, and indeed the enemy's navy did come around to land, so the first part of the fight will take on their landed marines. A lot of the marines are relatively heavy units who are decent in melee, but there's not very many of them, and we have a lot of javelins to throw at them, as you can see. So the plan was just to use loads of javelins to kill these guys before any melee started, to avoid trouble using arrows as well, and it's pretty effective. We're just mowing them down as they come off the boats. This is a deadly beach for them, and most of them just shatter before the fights are joined. Here's their admiral, who had a bigger unit of marines, and I'm just going to focus fire this guy down. He might be able to actually win or kill a decent amount of us in melee, so just need to make things nice and safe. Further along the beach where they had some lighter units landing, we're just going to wipe them out. Charging in, these guys who are unarmed just get annihilated, and there's not enough of them to do anything. Crushed up against their own ships, that's going to be an easy win, and we were able to shatter the enemy's admiral without having to fight those marines. Very nice, so our strength is going to be left at maximum for the fighting to come. I had over here 2 units of the two-handed axemen fighting with some enemy pelters. I thought that would be enough, but apparently not. They really struggled against them, and I think it's just the pelters being good. We've seen this before, the pelters are surprisingly good in melee. I actually checked their stats here in the replay, and they're a little bit worse than my medium infantry in melee, but that's still pretty good for a ranged unit or a javelin unit. Anyway, I ended up having to actually run away from that fight, and that's because the enemy's garrison came out to see what the hubbub was about, and I was about to get totally surrounded. The problem was my men were exhausted and didn't really put enough effort into running away. They took a lot of javelins from the enemy as they escaped, and I had to stop in the end and just fight the enemy pursuers. Luckily I'd drawn them close enough to the rest of my army that I could very quickly come and flank attack these units. And these are garrison units, they're not very good. They've got lots of mob style units that just rout pretty much instantly. That's all very nice, and they left their archers behind, so a couple of my units will now go in to catch them in melee. Very good. One of the cases where you're glad the skirmish AI doesn't work. They should have just kept running away, but they didn't, so that's nice. Now they've got 2 units of hoplites, but they're very small and very exposed, so we can do the classic surround and pound tactic on these guys. They are going to be completely outnumbered and perhaps even outclassed because they're not particularly good in melee, these guys. And they're not going to last very long at all here. It's reminiscent of the earlier battles against the Ptolemaic rubbishy hoplite units. So that was that really. We've now taken out the enemy's navy, and we've taken out most of the garrison. So that's 2 of the 3 groups we need to kill taken down, and the army is still coming in by transport ships. It's going to take a while. I was chasing their last unit through the town there, and even captured the town using that unit, so that was nice. So we're skipping ahead to when the enemy's army lands and the battle begins once again. They had 2 units landing in the town, and a couple of my units just stopped them because they were just archers and some dismounted cav or something. No problems there. The main fight, not such a one-sided thing, because now we're going to face the big units of hoplites, the pikemen, and they've got Thuros swords and things like that in this army. Interestingly, their pikemen seem to fast forward their motion sometimes, and this actually took me by surprise because it caused their units to move up on me a little bit quicker than I expected, so I'm not going to have to rush and get the micro going to surround these guys and try and inflict the morale penalties that we need to get rid of them, because we're not going to be killing them particularly quickly. Here there was 1 unit of generic trash spears, and that was nice to fight, but they were coming in with this hoplite phalanx onto our flank. However, they just stopped right in front of us and didn't attack us, so that was very kind. They're being very considerate of these Selucids. They know that they would win, and they don't want to be unsporting, so they are actually just going to stand there for pretty much the rest of the fight and not engage us. I'm pretty sure the phalanx AI doesn't necessarily work all the time in this mod. Anyway, so we get to the work of surrounding the enemy troops and trying to kill these isolated units, and it doesn't work quite as well as I wanted it to. We've seen it work better before, but I think the Selucid units are just higher in morale and quality in general than the things we've been fighting in the past, like the Ptolemaic and Tamahu units. So we just have to grind for a while. We need to actually inflict damage to get rid of them, and that means we're going to take damage fighting against them, but there's no other choice. I eventually went to attack that unit of hoplites that wasn't taking part in the fight, so even if they are conscientious objectors, they are going to be forced to fight in this battle and get surrounded as well. And the other little fights, not going as well as I would have hoped. As I mentioned, they're just not going down, these units. You can kill quite a lot of them and they still fight, and they're not particularly affected by the rear attacks. And we even have a pretty decent army advantage, and they're just not threatened by it. So we'll keep going, we need to keep killing them. It's similar to the previous battle Lacumazes fought in, where the enemy are too good to be threatened by just hitting them from the back. You need to hit them and kill half of them, and you can do that eventually. We had enough troops that it was bound to happen sooner or later, and once we started routing a couple of the surviving units, it actually chain routed everything, so things got dramatically easier at the end, and now all the survivors need to be hunted down. Because of a strange little way that this game engine works, the units that landed by sea can retreat even if they retreat off the map by land, meaning they'll be back on the ships somehow after the fight. So that means you need to kill them to avoid their navy just sailing off again after this. So we'll do just that, hunting them all down, and after a short time, I clearly get bored. It's a decisive victory. Just what we needed there. So a little gambit of trying to take Tyros and defy that balance bar has been successful, and this means Lacumazes is going to have a dramatically increased probability of survival. There was one little annoyance though that's actually going to make that increase in the probability not all that large, as we'll see in a second. First, we did lose a lot of men in that fight, 2 full units, but I guess that's to be expected given the level of challenge that battle at least theoretically posed against us, so that's a shame. But the real problem is I wanted to liberate this place again and give it back to Tyros, but I realised they're actually still alive. They are kindly raiding my own territory, so they're a very nice ally, aren't they? So that means we have to take Tyros and put ourselves in the situation I didn't want to be in, which is sitting here exposed to being attacked by the Selucids from all sorts of directions. I also couldn't replenish here, and I'm desperately trying to find out why. We've got enough culture, we've got enough population, and there's no drought, it's winter at the moment, so I'm not sure in this case why I couldn't replenish. Maybe you just can't replenish in a region that's just been taken, I'm not sure. Anyway, so I step outside of the settlement. That means if the settlement is attacked, I don't necessarily have to die fighting to the death defending it. I also did take Harmosia. That was pretty easy because I just had tons of siege equipment, so that gave me a giant advantage on the balance bar. We stack white to the enemy, taking moderate losses, and we're going to liberate a new faction here. I considered occupying it, but it'd be too annoying, and we want to move on to do more damage to the Selucids. So we'll just make another faction there, and we should be able to replenish a little bit, hopefully, in their territory. I'm going to do more annoying raids against nearby Selucid territory, but first, the Selucids do indeed attack Tyros, exactly what I was paranoid of happening, and now Lacumazes is drawn into the fight, and a missing feature is the ability to tell him not to get drawn into the fight. I would like for him to just retreat right now, but we have to fight. We can't retreat from settlement battles. We have absolutely no chance, so now we need to effectively lose in such a way that Lacumazes can personally escape. If I wanted to be really exploitative, I could have disbanded him before this fight or just replaced the general with someone else, but we're going to try this anyway, so I guess there is going to be at least one more episode of this series. I haven't seen any of your comments, by the way, on what people want to see with this series, because I'm making things in advance, but maybe by the time I make the next one I will have. Anyway, I'll see you for the next one.